just coming back to the lecture, the previous lecture, there were just two things I wanted to point out. First thing is, first question, what will change? Well, about nothing will change. And this is something I will say off records now because I'm talking about bad government in a minute. But the best friend, your best friend in Germany is the government. Because while implementing international conventions in the national law, the government made so many mistakes that many things that should be criminalized are actually not criminalized at all. So there are many possibilities to act without being in conflict with criminal law. So what will change? Well, I would say the only thing that will basically change is if you are developing hacking tools and you want to distribute them, then you're in trouble because that won't work anymore. But if you're just doing what you did before, there will be no changes. What does not mean that you're not criminalized. I was speaking here last year trying to explain to you when do you commit a crime while hacking, and most of the things are already criminalized. There are just very few things at the moment where you can act without committing a crime. So this law will not change anything. When you committed a crime before, you will commit a crime afterwards. So how much time do you have left? He said, I think, something like 75 days. You have all the time in the world. Nothing will change. I mean, as long as you're not distributing these tools. Because what do you think is going to happen? Do you think we're going to get more prosecutors, more policemen? Will they train them? Will we have trained policemen? No. I think in the general cases, nothing will happen. Nobody could prosecute you. Nobody can investigate you. Nobody can find you. This is why we have so few cybercrime or computer crimes in our statistics. And what will happen? Well, I think nothing will happen. This is just some things. The more dramatic changes will happen on a different place. And one of the reasons for that is the biggest problem we are facing at the moment is not that we don't have the right laws. The problem is that there is no international cooperation. So it does not work on an international level. So if you commit crimes on an international level on the internet, which is, well, happen every day, you have a good chance that you never be prosecuted. And the last point I wanted to point out, my distinguished speaker before, he said you can be, somebody asked what has happened to me when I be convicted, when I'm sent to jail. He said something, you're going to get something between 1 year and 10 years. That was the only thing I wanted to interrupt because that's not true. You're getting something up to 1 year. So not up to 10 years, starting from 1, but starting from 0 up to 1 year. And in most cases, nothing will happen. The prosecutor will fail to prosecute. The police will already fail to investigate. And even if you come to a judge, well, what will you get? What do you expect? You might get a fee. You will have to pay a fee, but that's all. You don't have to see yourself in prison. So these are just a few aspects I wanted to point out before I come to the real problem that I wanted to talk to you about. And I would just like to give you an overview about the current development. And I have sent out this call for paper, I've replied to the call for paper because I think there is something happening at the moment where I'm not too happy about. Everybody is concentrating when we're speaking about the state and gaining access to certain data, everybody is speaking about data retention. And I can tell you, many people who are in the government are very happy about this development because you cannot stop data retention at the moment anymore. The constitutional courts might be able to stop it. But what you could stop at the moment is what is happening after data retention. And while concentrating only on data retention, you are not concentrating on the more difficult aspect that we might face in the future. So I would like to speak to you about what is happening, what is already in the pipeline, what is already planned or even already implemented. And I don't have a solution. I haven't come here with a perfect solution that I can present to you. I would just like, to start a discussion with you, so I'm going to save some time afterwards. One of the biggest problems is that, well, lawyers, and I'm a lawyer as well, so maybe while sitting here you're giving a lawyer a third chance now with this presentation. Lawyers do not have your knowledge, and you might not have the legal knowledge. So what is very important is that we speak a lot. And this is something what I really enjoy by working for international organizations. I speak to many people. And I'm currently involved in a project for the Council of Europe in Serbia. And one of the most talented hackers, that's at least what everybody tells me, in the world are coming actually from Serbia. They're very good people there. And so I invited some of them to one conference where we were speaking about data retention. And believe me, there were prosecutors, who really had red hats. And they said, we need the data retention. And we had the providers who had red hats and said, listen, it's going out of my budget, I can't pay for it. And there were these hackers, and they were really relaxed. And I finally talked to them and said, guys, you should be the ones who really should be involved in this negotiation. Why don't you say anything? And they just said, we're pretty egoistic. And we don't care about you. You can have data retention. We can circumvent it. That's easy. The only thing we worry about are these 99% of the rest of the population that are using the internet, which are affected by that. We are quite safe. So this is something where I think it is very important, to involve you and get into a discussion. And this is maybe something I wanted to suggest to the people from CCC here, to set up something like a working group where people come together and discuss something. Because I'm not too happy about most of the press releases which are related to legal topics. Because when we would talk about this issue before, we might have been able to solve some of the questions that are then raised in the press releases. So my idea is give you an introduction, give you some idea where state authorities already have access to certain data, and then speak about specific problems in the internet. This is just some suggestions. Stop me anytime when you have any question. There is one thing I would like to say in the beginning, and that was something which is taking regard to the first lecture or the first presentation we heard today. Who to trust? Well, first of all, I do agree to the speaker in the audience who said, I don't want to live in a world where I can trust anybody. I was traveling to Oman, which is not far away from Saudi Arabia this year, to give a presentation about cybercrime there. And this is a country where you can trust anybody. You can leave your money on the street. Nobody will take it. But the reason for that is not that everybody is so nice in this country. The reason is just that there is so much threat. Because you can be sure, if you steal anything, you're going to be taken to prison, and this is a place where you will never see the sun again. So this society, where you can trust anybody, works with pressure, and I don't want to live in that world. I do much more say, don't trust anybody. I'm not into conspiracy theories, and I trust you, I trust most of you, but not in any case. So I think it's not important that we are living in a society where you can trust anybody. But the question is, can you trust the state? Can you trust the government? And my clear answer would be no, not at all. That's not your job. Your job is, or our job is, to control the government and not to trust them. We're electing them. So, this is a very important issue. And when you look in the theories, state theories, and you look at when people back, let's say, 200-300 years ago, try to draw a picture of how the state looks like, in most cases, these were monsters. These were monsters that are controlling bad people in the state, but monsters that you can hardly control. Hobbes and Locke in the UK, who developed theories about state and how state are constructed, always had the idea of some big monster controlling us, and we have to control them. And the difficult situation at the moment that we're facing, and so I can understand if you're frustrated, is that our government, most of our governments, are not listening anymore to advices. There are some 500, let's say between 200 and 500 people, depending on the state, that are making the rules, and they're not really listening anymore to experts. So just take control in the airport. I'm not allowed to take a gun into the airport. Okay, I'm not allowed to take a knife into the airport. But when I'm sitting in business class, I get a knife. So does it make sense? No. I'm traveling a lot, so I was at the airport right after the planned attacks in the UK. By the way, none of these guys that were supposed to have committed one of those crimes or that were supposed to plan those crimes are actually in prison at the moment. They were all released. But nevertheless, I'm not allowed to take big liquids bottles in the plane anymore. And the day I was there, they were doing some control, and I had to open my suitcase, and they said, there is liquid, this is liquid, this is liquid. Put it into the box. And I wanted to throw them in the box, and they said, no, open the bottles and put them in. And I said, what for? And they said, well, we have some information that people wanted to build bombs out of liquids. And I said, how did they do it? They said, well, they wanted to combine them in the plane. And I said, do you think it's a good idea to combine them in the box? Well, no, it's not, but they don't listen. And if you start to argue to them, they say, go back to the queue, you're not cooperating. Listen, you're not cooperating. Okay, so I stopped that. But it's the same situation we're facing a number of issues. And when we were talking about this law, a number of experts says, listen, the law that you're doing at the moment on the EU level, Council of Europe level, this is not right. You're making mistakes. But the state is not listening anymore. And this is something that we have to be curious about. But don't stop to complain. It's important. It's very important to continue to complain and to control the state. So just one last aspect anymore. When you say, only the government, should I only not trust the government? I would say no. Don't trust lawmakers in general. So who's drafting laws? You would say, well, that's the government. Unfortunately, it's not. Big companies are drafting the law. You can ask big software companies and ask them, listen, we need a new law on copyright protection. Can you draft the law for us? And they say, yeah, of course, you don't have to pay us for that. We're going to draft the law. But imagine which interest will be protected by that law. So this is happening on a large scale all around the world. So I'm running into companies. When I'm working for international corporations like the Council of Europe, I'm running into competitors, other companies that are offering the same services. And this is something where I'm curious about as well, and where I'm a little bit suspicious about. So don't trust lawmakers in general, and not only if they're elected. Okay, some overview. The topic, or my title was Know Your Citizen. Well, that is coming from something completely different. It's coming from some procedure which is called Know Your Customer. And this is the idea to prevent money laundering. We, and that means I'm now speaking as a state authority, what I'm not, but we are forcing the financial institutions to know their customer. Because then you know, if you know your customer is going to an ATM machine once a week, if he's going there 5 times a day, you know something must be wrong. And then you can maybe stop it. And so you can stop, the idea is to stop money laundering by knowing the customer. So the idea is to detect suspicious transaction, any suspicious action in general. So there is something what we see at the moment, which is know your citizen. And I've just chosen that picture. Why do we have these kind of trash bins in Paris? Because the state wants to know what I put in. Is there a bomb inside? Doesn't look very nice, but, well, that's the idea. They want to know much about. This is something harmless. I mean, I don't have to throw it in there. I can throw it in the street or under a car. But this is an idea. This is an idea how this is going on. And there are 2 basic ideas why the state is doing so. One is investigating crimes. They want to have as many information as possible to afterwards investigate if a crime has happened and who was the offender. And the other one is prevention of crime, and that is much more dangerous when we're speaking about this issue. Okay, and I spoke about this already, I just wanted to mention it again. Data retention, what everybody's concentrating about, is just one aspect in a long line and a long strategy. And we are at the moment concentrating on the wrong part. The discussion on this issue is gone. And I have to say that was not a very fruitful discussion we've had about data retention. When you speak to people who are not member of the European Union and you present to them data retention law that we have right now or that we're going to get in Germany soon, they say, listen, there are so many mistakes that you're pointing out. It can be circumvented so easily. Why did nobody discuss this during the legislation process on the EU level? And they completely don't understand it. And there are some countries that haven't had a democratic structure for years, but still they already have some kind of idea how democracy should work. And I can only say the fact that 25 countries have come together, 25 democratic countries have come together to form a union does not mean that what they're doing is very democratic. This process, how the Data Retention Directive came along, was something that was not democratic at all. Any kind of discussion about this issue, any controversial discussion was stopped with pressure, with political pressure. So this was an idea of the UK government that wanted to push it through in their time, in their 6 months they had. And this is nothing which has to do anything with democracy. But I will speak about this in a minute again. I want to give you some examples how government wants to get information. Well, one of the most interesting one is CENSUS. They're sending you a form and say, we would like to know what our population is about, how many people are living in our country. Okay, that's a necessary aspect. We need to know that. Okay, but do we need to know how big your kitchen is? And how many electronic devices you have in your house? How many people there are living? How many bedrooms do you have? How many beds? How big is your bathroom? These are all information which are not necessary. They're interesting for the state, but the question is only what for. Next thing, car registration. If you buy a car, you need a registration wherever you buy it in the world. That's the same in all countries. So the idea is know your citizen's car. That's the idea behind it. Okay, why do we need it? Okay, if there is a car accident and somebody is simply driving away who has caused the accident, we want to be able to identify them. That's great. Okay, but we cannot identify the driver. We can only identify the car. We don't know who was driving. That's one of the important issues. And it can be circumvented, of course. I mean, I can steal a car and drive with it, and even if you have the registration number, it doesn't help you to find the driver who was actually driving. So what is happening here at the moment is they only need this number for some administrative reasons, and if somebody sees you committing a crime with this registration, they try to find the offender. But they want to go far beyond that with this registration number. I'm going to speak about this in a minute while comparing it to data retention. Okay, ID, in most countries, not all European countries, you need an ID as soon as you reach a certain age. So you need to register. You need to tell the state, where are you living? So, how old are you? How tall are you? What's your colors? What's your eyes color? And how do you look like? Give us a picture of that. These are information that you have to leave there. So the state wants to know some things. For example, if you are committing a crime and the police is looking for you, they want to know where to look for you. So you always have to tell them where you are most of your time. If you're moving, in most countries you have to tell them. Tell this to an American. If you tell an American, hey, we need an ID, and we have to show it, police can stop us and can ask for the ID. He says, looking, are you living in a Nazi country again? What is happening? You don't have to show your ID. Your state doesn't need to know where you are. I mean, you're in the country, that's all. And we want to move. We want to move from one point to another point without giving anybody this information. We have a different philosophy here. No, we need to register. And there is an administrative fee, and this is something what we're going to speak about in a minute again. If you are not going along with the requirements of state access to certain information, there is always some kind of sanction. Can be an administrative fee, can be imprisonment. So this is an essential element of all kind of attempts from the state to get control of certain data. Fingerprints, I mean, think about the next generation of passports that we're going to have. There's going to be a fingerprint inside. This is something which was coming originally from the US. They said, we need this. We need to control that there are no terrorists coming in our country, and therefore we need RFID chips in our passport, and we need fingerprints. Well, actually, if you follow the discussion about RFID chips and password at the moment in the US, you will see that many, many people say, we don't need this, we don't want this. We don't want an RFID chip on our passport. RFID is a great technology for tracking goods, but not for tracking citizens. So we're going to have this fingerprint in there. So the state has the fingerprint. Well, what for? Well, to prove that your passport was not modified, that this is really your passport. You have applied for it and you are still using it. But this fingerprint can be used for other purposes as well. They can prove that I was standing here while taking my fingerprint because they have a huge database then. So they know many information, or they can have access to many information, many more information, and these proceedings are just on the way. CCTV. I mean, in Germany, we already have a lot of those cameras on public places. So the idea is, know what your citizens are doing on public places. We want to know that. The state needs to control it. We have to make the people aware that they are safe. You know, you can go to those places. Don't worry. There are no criminals around. We're taking care about you. In the UK, you can hardly walk on any place on the street without being captured by any of those CCTV cameras. And there was a great presentation last year, hacking CCTV, finding out what these people are actually watching. And it was a pretty interesting situation that they were actually not watching the street looking for criminals, but watching into the windows where people had no curtains there. So, you know, naked woman walking around, these are the targets of those cameras. Is that the right idea? Well, actually not. So these are things that we're already familiar with. But, you know, this is stupid. I was taking this picture. I just wanted to tell you, I was taking a similar picture at an embassy. I was in Serbia again for the 15th time this year, and I thought, okay, I'm going to walk through the city and take a few pictures. And I wanted to take a picture of a great CCTV camera right in front of the US Embassy. And I took the picture. And immediately, there are two policemen coming. And I said, okay, what's the problem? I was taking a picture of the camera. And they said, well, you're not allowed to take a picture of the camera. And I said, well, but how do you want to stop me? I could drive around with a car, taking pictures out of the car. You wouldn't even recognize it. And they said, doesn't matter. You took a picture. You have to contact our boss. We have to take you to our police station. And I can tell you, it was very, very difficult. I had to call the assistant minister to ask him to give them a ring and stop them from doing it. So I had to delete this picture. I am presenting you a picture from a CCTV camera at the Portuguese embassy in Macau now instead. Okay. Okay, folks, does this make sense? Does it make sense to stop somebody, a tourist, from taking a picture of a CCTV camera? No. I mean, I was growing up in a town not far away from the Netherlands border here in Germany, and there was a huge airfield. It was a NATO air base. And you know, on no plan that you were able to buy from the surrounding, it was marked. It was always looking like a field. But there was a NATO air base. So when you were walking closer, there were big fences. Okay, everybody who was living in that area, of course, knew that there was an airfield because planes were starting and landing. But it was not marked on any plan that you were able to buy. And I logged on to one of these services on the internet, and I could not just see where it is, I could even see planes standing there. What sense does it make to stop me from taking a picture of a CCTV camera in front of an embassy if I can get information about secret military infrastructure on the internet? It doesn't make any sense at all. So we really have to think about this one. We really have to think. But if you start questioning, you're only getting in more trouble. So there are many information the state wants to get access to, and there are, on the other hand, many information the state does not want you to get access to. So this is another topic, but it's happening on the internet as well. So I would just like to go on by presenting to you how is it going to go on. Well, at the moment they're discussing about having DNA samples from you, because it would be better. You know, you can easily prevent leaving fingerprints by wearing gloves, but it's much more difficult not to leave DNA traces. That's pretty difficult. So isn't that a good idea? Knowing your citizens' DNA structure would be useful as well to find out if there is somebody's ill. So these information could be very valuable. But do I want my state to have them? No. Why? He doesn't need it. He needs it if I've committed a crime. But even then, they have to prove it. So they can say, we have a big suspect. We think that you've committed a crime. Then we can negotiate about me giving them DNA sample. But not to anybody without having committed any crime. So they go on and say, I mean, I don't know who of you has come from another country, but maybe you realize these wonderful toll collect stations on the motorways. They're actually realizing if there are lorries driving around the street and then they have to pay a certain toll for using the motorway. They're actually discussing at the moment to use them for cars as well, so you have to pay whenever you use the motorway. They don't want to take something like they don't want you to pay an administrative fee at the beginning for 1 year. They want to know exactly where you were traveling, which motorways you were using, and then you're getting the bill afterwards. And of course, they want to use these machines that are very powerful, of course, for preventing crimes and investigating crimes. They want to know where you were going with your car, know where your citizens are driving. That means it can be very useful to afterwards investigate crimes. If you say, well, there is a suspect and know he was driving on the motorway and then he left the motorway somewhere between two toll stations. So that could help you. But do I want my state to know where I am driving? And for example, if I'm speeding between two toll stations, because they can find out that as well. They know what time I passed the first one, what time I passed the second one. Do I want them to know that? No, not at all. But they want this information. Cell phone location. I mean, it's impossible not to talk about George Orwell when we're talking about state control or access to certain information. But George Orwell never had the idea that each of us is carrying around one of these little cell phone devices that enables at least our cell phone provider to locate where we are. Not very well, but at least they can tell you where around you are. So these information were already used in criminal cases in Germany, proving that a suspect has been at a certain place. So my question in these cases would be, where or why were these information stored? I mean, why do cell phone providers store information where I am? So the criminal or the law enforcement agencies can have access to this information later on. I don't want that. So do I have to turn off my cell phone anytime I'm driving in some areas where I don't want law enforcement to know that? Well, the question is quite obvious, because the state is getting access, or is gaining, would like to have access to those information as well. But we all the time we are in the real world. I'm not going to talk about payback cards. I'm sorry for those people who are using those payback cards, because of course your information is stored as well, and you're selling information for a pretty cheap price. At the beginning you got some money, then you got some discount, and now you're getting some stupid things. You're getting a football now, if you're leaving your sensitive information. So, well, maybe some of you are actually using them. Okay, coming to the main point, coming to the internet. And this is now another development. When you're speaking to lawmakers, and now I'm talking about politicians as well as lawyers and companies, many of them actually don't have your knowledge. They don't know what there is going on. They don't know how to draft the law and how they can prevent crimes happening in the internet. Two things are pretty important. Sometimes there are much more strict regulations, much more intensive instruments implemented in the internet at the moment. Something that would not work, that nobody would accept in the real world. And I always suggest that you should compare those instruments, what people want to implement in the internet, with these instruments that we have in the real world. And if you would say, I can accept them, I would accept them in the real world, well, then you can accept them in the internet as well. So let's just say destruction of property. Well, if you're coming to my house and simply destroy my house, I would say, you know, that's a crime. You should be taken to justice. And if you come and attack my computer and destroy all my data on my computer, I would say the same. That should be a crime. I mean, some of you might say, no, it should not. But my position is that should be a crime. But we shouldn't criminalize something in the internet that we do not criminalize outside the internet. If you are sending a kid a letter telling the kid, I am a 15-year-old boy, and you're writing this letter to a girl, say, or you're giving her a phone, that's much better. You're giving her a phone call and say, listen, I'm a 15-year-old boy and I would like to meet you. I would like to invite you to an ice cream. And instead you want to rape her. This is not a crime. This is preparation of a crime. If you're sending her an email and writing, listen, I'm a 15-year-old boy, I want to invite you to an ice cream, and you send out the email, you're already committing a crime in Germany. Why is that? Why is a phone call better than an email? There is no reason for that. But this is something what we really have to take care about, especially when we're talking about access to information. So what we can see, what we can identify, and I was rushing through my presentation very much, so you might not have recognized that, but when we have any kind of control instrument, we need a sanction, otherwise it doesn't work. We tell you, you have to register. I want to know where you're living. If you don't, you get a fee. When you're driving a car, you need a registration. If you don't, you're going to get an administrative fee. You will have to pay a fee. So these instruments are working in the internet as well, or they're trying to implement them. But at the moment we're discussing about new instruments. When you see something happening in Germany, for example, there were two guys that are trying to bomb a train. They're trying to use two bombs and let them explode in a train. Afterwards, the day after that, there was a big, in all newspapers, big advertisement. Ministry of Interior says we need a stricter control of the internet. And I was wondering, why is that now? Why is that? Well, because it seems that they were looking for plans how to build a bomb in the internet. Okay, what do you do when you find out that they were going to a library? Do you want to say we have state police now in the library to prevent people from having a look in books where you find information how to build a bomb? It doesn't work. So every time something is happening, people are shouting and say, listen, it's just because of the internet. That makes it very easy. Always say it's happening in the internet. So what could the reason be that we need stricter access to information from the state in the internet? Well, one reason could be that because the number of crimes are exploding. Computer crimes are exploding, but they're not. They're going down. They're still on the same level. These are the number of computer crimes committed. No, these are the number of computer crimes detected in Germany. I would say this is maybe 10% of what is really happening. But the law enforcement agencies are simply not able to realize them. Companies are not complaining. I mean, if you're hacking into a bank's computer, you will hardly find a bank that says, listen, somebody hacked my computer. And I'm regularly giving presentation on banks. I'm always asking them, I said, listen, you had a phishing case. They said, no, phishing case? No, none of our customers. And I said, listen, I was contacted by the prosecution, and I know that it was, oh, you mean that case, that one? I forgot that. Why is that? Because the danger that people are losing trust in the institution is much higher than the price they have to pay for compensating those kind of crimes. So this is something which is happening on a large scale. So many crimes are not detected because the victims are not responding. But there are no crimes. There is no explosion of crimes. We don't need stricter instrument. They already work or don't work, but we don't need better one. So next thing is terrorism. Terrorism is always a big topic. I mean, terrorism is not an explanation. At the moment, it's used in explanation. When you want to get a law passed, you always say terrorism. This is a law that we need to fight terrorism. That means you don't have to explain that. You don't have to give any further explanation. But terrorism is not an explanation. It still needs to work. But nevertheless, there are many laws explained with terrorism. But what we always have to ask, and I want to say this right away, fighting against cybercrime is difficult, and we need to fight against cybercrime. We need to protect our society. I mean, things that are happening there, some things like distribution of child pornography, cannot be in the interest of anybody. So we need to be able, we need the right instruments to fight against them. So I want law enforcement agencies to be able to fight against cybercrime. And with these instruments that they have, instruments that have been developed something like 100 years ago, search and seizure procedures, they don't work on the internet anymore. And we have to tell them. So I would like to stop them from inventing something on the track. That means they go into a house and say, okay, we don't have the right instrument, but now we're going to search on your computer and we're trying to hack into your system. There is no instrument for that. We need a legal basis. So we need to discuss things. We need to discuss things like real-time collection of traffic data. You can tape any conversation if you think there is somebody committing a serious crime. Why shouldn't you be able to interfere the communication when somebody who is suspect of committing a serious crime is sending out emails? That should be possible. But this is preventing us from these general instruments that we're realizing right now, like data retention, which is affecting anybody. It's not only affecting the suspect of a crime, it's affecting anybody. So when we're talking about this instrument, one thing is important. We always have to compare the amount of freedom that we're taking with the additional security that we're achieving. And in most cases at the moment, these instruments are taking a lot of freedom, but we're not getting very much more security, because those guys who are committing the crimes actually know how to circumvent them. So it doesn't help us, but all the other people are affected. And I mean, those countries which are most interested in data retention outside of Europe are countries where you wouldn't like to be somebody who is, for example, interested in political topics which are not supported by the government. And I don't want to mention any name, but in a number of Eastern countries where I have traveled, these people are very interested in data retention because they would like, the state would like to know something about their enemies, about terrorists, and they are defining who terrorists are. By the way, those people that were fighting against Nazi regime in Germany, they were terrorists as well, from the definition of the government at that time. So we have to think. So we have to think very carefully who we allow to define what terrorists are. So let us speak about what is happening on the internet. Well, we have this EU directive on data retention. It was the quickest directive I have ever seen, and as far as I know, it's the quickest directive in the history of the EU. There was a proposal in September 2005. This was adopted by the EU Parliament with a lot of pressure from the Council, from the European Council, in December 2002, and in February 2006 it was adopted by the Council. There was no space for discussion, not at all. That should have been something which should have been discussed for a year before it goes through the parliamentary proceeding, but it did not. What is it about? Well, it's the obligation of any service provider in this territory, in the territory of the European Union, to store certain traffic information for a period of between 6 and 24 months. Okay. It's a complete change of our EU legislation, because until now, data protection is something which is on the very, very top agenda of the EU. They were way ahead of a number of countries. Traffic data needed to be deleted right after the end of use. That means, for example, the IP address that you were using to do some activities on the internet needed to be deleted right away after the use. Right now, under the EU Directive on Data Retention, these information will need to be stored for a long period of time. But does it help? Does it help to prevent cybercrime? No, not for those people who know how to circumvent it, and it's very easy. You can use public terminals. Nobody can trace you back. The idea of data retention is to trace the route back to the offender who was committing the crime. Use a public terminal, and all information they do have is, well, which IP address were you were using, and then they come to the public terminal, and that was it. Wireless access points. I mean, driving through town, you know that much better than I do. It's very easy to find an access point where you don't have to register. So you can simply log on and commit your computer crimes there. Hacked system. A number of people are using a system. What do? There is knock, knock, knock. I'm the policeman. who committed this crime, and there are 3 or 4 guys that are smiling and says, I don't know, could be any of us. So in criminal proceedings, we need somebody, we need a suspect. We have to say, you, it was you. Very difficult to prove that. Well, and of course you can use services, Anonymizer, that have locations outside of the territory, where it is very difficult to have data retention, because if it is going outside the country and there is no data retention obligation, that's the end of the trace. So there are a number of possibilities to easily circumvent it. So what we need is, and this is something I would like you to think about, is what the state authorities, or those people who are drafting those laws, are now thinking about is how to prevent these numbers. They're very interested in how could this system be circumvented. And now they want to prevent it. I would just like to present you one law which is already in power. In Italy, it says anybody who is using or who's offering public internet access needs to ask the person who wants to use it for his registration. So when you go to Italy and go to an internet cafe, first thing they say is, show me your ID, please. And they're writing down everything on your ID or make a copy of it. That means they want to prevent that somebody could use a public terminal to commit a computer crime without being registered. So this is only the first spot of those spots of circumvention. We have more ones. There is just drafted, some laws are drafted. You are not allowed to set up an unprotected wireless network anymore. You have to register any kind of network. It's not in power at the moment, but there are already some cases which go into that direction. For example, there are some copyright cases on a civil level, not on a criminal level, where they say if you have an open wireless network and somebody is committing copyright violation on this via this network, so if somebody is logging on and using file sharing systems, you, the one who is offering the network point, is responsible for it. We can't find the guy who was doing it, but you're responsible because you were opening some kind of source which is in great danger for the society. So we're going to have more legislation on this issue, because without further legislation, data retention is absolutely useless. So what I would like to just ask you is to think about what could happen and how we could prevent it. Because I think anonymity on the internet is essential. I don't want anybody to know what I'm doing on the internet. I want state authorities to have access to many things. I want them to investigate, take down servers, but I don't want them to record everything. I don't want to live in that kind of world. Otherwise, the only solution is really to move. Okay, I have some more things about this issue for you. I have an alternative solution, which is laid down in the Convention on Cybercrime. You remember the bad Convention on Cybercrime from the Council of Europe. They have something, a quick freeze instrument. They said, no, data protection. We have the idea of the Council of Europe's protection of human rights. That's a great idea of the Council of Europe. And they said, this is the violation of data retention would be a violation of human rights. So Council of Europe, which should not be mixed up with the EU, Council of Europe, a separate organization, said no data retention, violation of human rights. We're going to have a quick freeze procedure. If you think somebody's committing a crime, you're going to phone the provider and say, from now on you store certain traffic data. But only then, only for the suspect, not from all people in the world. So that could be an alternative solution. Of course, you cannot catch anybody. You cannot sit down, wait for 6 months, and then start your investigation. That doesn't work. But it would not violate the privacy of so many people. So the second thing I would just rush and just explain to you, because it's happening as well, know your citizen's password. What is that? Well, there were a number of reports about terrorist activities. When you speak to people from the Secret Service and ask them, can you tell me any case where terrorists attacked critical infrastructure via the internet? They always say, well, it happens, but I cannot speak about this. So there are many reports where people say, you know, it could be that terrorists were using or were doing. And one of these reports was, it could be that terrorists are using encryption technology. What was the result? Lawmakers said, we need a law. We need to stop this. That can't be true. There are terrorists that are encrypting their information and we don't have any access to it anymore. So there's a huge discussion going on at the moment. What kind of ban on encryption technology should we have? Should we have something like these Escrow key agencies where whenever you have a key, you have to leave it there, so law enforcement agencies had access to it? Or shall we say we put a ban on certain encryption technology, you're not allowed to use certain keys which are too powerful? So this is going on, but this is just, you know, the low level. They want you to concentrate on this. They want you to put all your power in preventing this. But on the background, they're even going further. In the UK, they have a law which is not in power yet, but was already adopted, which says, listen, if we send you a request to offer us your password because we think that you have committed a computer crime or any crime, and you have encrypted some file, and you don't give me this information. Even though I cannot prove you now that you've committed a crime, we're sending you for 2 years into prison just because of not giving me the key. What if you forgot the password? Excellent question. Well, this will be a question that will be that you will need to discuss with the judge instead of me. If he believes that you really forgot the question, he might let you.
After a post-traumatic stress disorder, when they grab you.
Okay, there is even a better way to circumvent it. There is the possibility of this technology called plausible deniability, where you have some kind of encryption and you have 2 passwords. The first password, well, they can prove that you are using encryption technology. So you give them the first password, and the first password is leaving you to some information which are maybe not as good for you as possible, but which are not really criminal information. So some porn pictures, for example, you say, I was trying to hide them from my wife and my kids, so therefore this was the idea of this archive, this encrypted archive. But what they cannot do is they cannot prove if there is anything else in this archive. But if you have the right key, you have access to the real secret information. So that would be plausible deniability. You can always say, there is nothing else, this is the key. So it can be circumvented. And of course, I mean, criminals, let's say somebody was planning an attack on any critical infrastructure, any terrorist attack, he wouldn't give you the key. I mean, he would say, I go for 2 years in prison, but I'm not stupid. Why should I give you the key? Then you will send me to prison for 20 years. So, you know, this is from my point of view, this is violating fundamental principles of human rights. I mean, me as a suspect, I don't have to cooperate with you as law enforcement agencies. I can sit down and say, do your job, do whatever you want. You have the power, you can search my house, you can do whatever you want, take with you what you want, but I'm not going to cooperate. And this is something where they're forcing me to cooperate, and I'm not very happy about this development. And it's even in the Convention on Cybercrime, where I have to say this is a very critical point that I criticize on my own. I'm not working for the Council of Europe on a permanent basis. I'm an external expert, so I can say that without any problem. In Article 19, it says basically, or the idea of Article 19, subparagraph 4 is basically, listen, there are law enforcement agencies coming to a big company or to your house, and you have 20 servers. One is in the basement, one is somewhere, wherever. If you're looking for certain information, you don't find them. Law enforcement agencies, policemen, whatever, they are, let's say, 10 or 15 in Germany that really would find information in a big company. We have some good policemen that are able to fight against those kind of crimes, but just very few. And so what the idea of Article 19 is, if there is a system administrator, we are forcing him to cooperate with us. We are forcing him to locate information we are looking for. We can say, listen, you have to follow the order to show us certain information, and in the explanatory report of this article, it says you have to disclose passwords. That means if you know the COE's password, you have to give us his password. So this is, again, something that I see pretty critically. Because if you're doing search and seizure procedures outside the internet and you come to a company, everybody can relax and sit back right now. But under this provision, you would have to cooperate. You have to support the work of the law enforcement agencies, and normally it should be their job to do what they're actually doing, to find the information they are looking for. But the difference to the provision I was presenting to you before is that this one, that everybody is forced to cooperate apart from the suspect. You can always sit back if you're the suspect and say, I don't cooperate. Everybody else needs to cooperate, but not me. So if you're protecting your password properly, nobody can force anybody to offer or disclose this password. I've seen that, and I'm going to finish it. Alternative solution, how can we... is there any alternative? Well, that's a question to you. Is there any alternative? How can we maybe have a possibility to have access to some encrypted information in some cases where it is really necessary, but to enable the use of anonymous communication and of encryption technology by the majority of people without law enforcement getting access to their data? This is something I want you to think about. I don't have a solution. I think this is one point where we simply have to say, we cannot take this. We cannot take the freedom, because the amount of freedom we would take if we would say we would put any kind of ban on encryption technology, the amount of freedom is always too big if we compare it with the additional security that we do get. So this is something where I'm at the end of my wisdom. I have no idea how to deal with this problem. But as you see, it's always going beyond. It's not data retention. Much more interesting is what kind of laws we will have afterwards to prevent the circumvention of data retention. And the same with encryption technology. It's not the question, what regulations will we have on the use of encryption software, on the programming and distribution of encryption software. It's much more the question, what will we do with the circumvention? And this is something what we need to discuss in the future. So I would like to finish my presentation here at the moment and would like to give you the last 50 minutes of time that we do have to ask questions. Hopefully I will be able to answer them. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, we have a question. Why somebody's organizing the microphone? I'm just going to tell you one last story. I was going to a number of strange places this year. I was going to Russia, to China, I was going to Oman, and I have all these stamps in my passport. And I was always wondering when one of my colleagues is going to ask me, what did you do in Oman? Or what did you do in Russia, speaking about terrorism on the internet? Nobody ever asked me. But the only topic, the only speech they're always asking about is the presentation that I gave here last year. They always say, what did you do there? So, okay, give me something to talk about when I go home.
Okay. You said we should win some security by giving up freedom. We don't. We don't win any security at all. Because I had a case of stalking via internet, about 16 months. I went to the police, I told them. I gave them IP addresses. I put it on my web server and said, you can get all the data there, 1 megabyte of data. I made it up in HTML that I can read it better. Put a lot of work in it. And I waited. After I went to the police, I waited 8 weeks. After they fetched the data. And 3 weeks after that, I got a letter. We couldn't find out who it was because they started too late. We don't win anything.
No, I mean, there are two people who are supporting your work. The first one is the German government, because it's not implementing the right provision. The second one is the police. Actually, they're waiting too long. So whenever you are committing a crime, it will be very likely that they will never catch you because they're taking too long. You're absolutely right. But there are some cases, for example, child pornography cases, where without the right instruments, we're not able to trace back the offenders. And in those cases, there is an additional security, or there would be an additional security for the kids that are abused to produce those child pornography if we would have the right instruments. So I would not say these instruments which are implemented, like data retention, would be useless. No, data retention would be useful. We would find some more cases, but not from those people that we want to catch. Those people know how to circumvent it. So there is very little security we get by giving up very much freedom. So you're absolutely right. Yes, please.
You mentioned that you talk to lawmakers and decision makers. My experience with decision makers is that they know the general idea of 1984 and that they understand the trade-off that you show between taking away a lot of freedom and getting a little bit more of increased security. What do you think is their motivation in doing it nonetheless?
Okay, first of all, they don't. I'm not the right person to talk to lawmakers because they're not listening to what I say. If you look, I wrote something about, let's say, 10 or 15 articles just about the Convention on Cybercrime and the EU framework decision on attacks against computer system. They didn't quote any of them. I was pointing out a number of difficulties, what needs to be changed. They didn't quote them. They were quoting the last article, I think, was quoted from 1987 or 88. So in the meantime, they didn't even look what people were writing. So my idea, or that's at least my experience, is as soon as you're coming to a certain point, you're reaching a certain point on a political level, and you're the one who's making a decision, you're feeling personally touched if somebody tells you you're wrong. Because you were investing time and you were voted. People were actually voting for you. So these people, and this is something where I do not blame them for it, it seems to happen on a large scale, they really feel personally touched if you say, sorry, you were wrong, there must be something that you need to change. So, and keep in mind, there is not the state. There are many people, there are politicians that are actually forming the state, and they all have a history. You know, there are some people I can't stand. There is a history that I have. Maybe I was victim of computer crimes, and therefore I say I want to get them. And I know there were people who were very much interested in data retention, and they said we should not have any cameras. There should be a ban on cameras in public places. But at the moment where they're bicycle was stolen right in front of the Parliament building, they were the first one who ran into the office that actually had control over those cameras and said, I want to have this tape, I want to know who stole my bicycle. So, you know, these are just people. And at the moment, what is my experience is that they are simply personally touched by any kind of criticism and that they're resisting against any kind of advices. It's a very difficult situation outside this parliamentary world because people can tell me you're wrong, sorry, you made a mistake, and I have to live with this. When I'm standing in front of a judge and I'm defending somebody and he tells me, no, sorry, you were wrong, I have to accept it. I'm going to say, no, I'm right, I'm elected, it doesn't work. I hope I answered your question. There is another question. Yes, please.
Yes. Here?
I don't know where.
Yeah. Over here.
Oh,
Can
sorry.
you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I thought you had a very good suggestion of comparing the treatment of things in the physical world and the internet. So, in the physical world, if a person or a large company commits a crime or is thought to commit a crime, a government bureaucrat cannot say, give me your papers. But the government can go to a judge and say, I would like a warrant or a subpoena, and then force you to give me your papers, which may provide evidence of your crime. So an analogy for the internet would not be to allow any government bureaucrat or policeman to say, give me your key, but perhaps to go to a judge who must consider the evidence currently available and perhaps issue a warrant that says you must provide your key.
Absolutely. I was too quick on that one. This is going to happen. This is going to be implemented. But the question is, I will just compare it again. Let's say data retention. Let's take it outside the internet. You have a car and you have a registration. This is like an IP address. Let's say it this way. It's not the same, but let's say, would you like, when you leave your garage and go on the street, that they register he's going on the street, then he's turning left, then he's speeding a little bit, then he went right, then he went left. You don't want this. So this is what I would like to compare. Data retention is like that. It's like recording everything you're doing on the street, everything you're doing on the internet. With regard that I need an order from a judge, this will be the same. We will have, when we talk about data retention, for example, access to those information will only be given after the judge has ordered it. But I don't trust judges as well. There are so many judges in Germany, we've just had the discussion. There was the German federal police that were using spyware. They were cooperating with access providers to install a little spyware and hack into your system to get certain information from your system. And there was one judge who finally said, no, listen, that doesn't work. Where did you find a provision that allows you to do that in our penal code or our procedure code? There is none. But many people were pretty sure that they were allowed to do what they were actually doing, and they were contacting judges before. So I don't trust judges as well. I don't want anybody to have access to those information, even if a judge orders that. Because what we're talking when we talk about data retention is simply storing everything you're doing on the internet. And there are many things I do on the internet that government will not be happy about. I complain about things they're doing, so I don't want anybody to have access to those information. But it was nevertheless a great remark. Thanks for the question. Yes, please. Oh, there's another one here.
Don't you think that preventing crimes is just a straw man? And because you argued that, for example, this password measure is only good for crimes with maximum penalty of 2 years, because otherwise you would trade going into jail for 2 years. And therefore, and all these measures can be prevented if you try hard enough. But you only stop naive people. So all these measures are against naive people, and the probable interest behind this is, for example, entertainment industry that sees their business go down the drain and they want their measures rather than preventing big crimes. It's just copyright prevention.
You can hardly prevent a crime. That's nearly impossible. You need to invest so much energy to prevent a crime. To stop terrorists from starting their attack, it's nearly impossible. But the question is, for example, I would just point out numbers. How many successful attacks have we had, attacks against airplanes have we had in the last 5 years? None. There was no terrorist attack on the airplanes, but nevertheless we have a lot of legislation in this area. So investigating cybercrime, using certain information to investigate crimes after they have happened, this is possible, but preventing them is something which is not, it doesn't work. It doesn't work if somebody really wants to commit a crime, you will not be able to stop him. So therefore argumentation, we want to use these tools to prevent crimes is something which is, at least from my point of view, nonsense. You cannot use them. You have to use the mic, I'm sorry.
I think they're just hiding their agenda.
Sure.
And by not saying it loud, you're kind of taking part of that.
Absolutely right, but normally when they hide...
They're not interested in big
Normally
crimes.
when they want to hide their intention, they simply say terrorism, and then you have to shut up, because if you say anything against that, you are against fighting against terrorism. So I think we will have to... one more. Yes, please.
I think you will have to ask legislators what's the purpose of a certain law, and after some time that they have enacted the law, make an evaluation if the purpose has been achieved, or if you have had collateral damage.
Yeah, but
because all those laws are officially intended to fight the bad guys, spammers and people who share children pornography, or hackers who really steal data and do this for money. But in fact, it's going against all the small people.
But the fact is, the lawmakers...
You can't fight the real bad guys.
Right, but the lawmakers need to understand the system. They need to have your knowledge. You can tell them this is so easy to circumvent it, but the lawmakers don't have the knowledge that you do have to understand this. When you tell them, how do you want to prevent two terrorists communicating via internet? They say, we cut the wire. We cut the wire and then they cannot communicate anymore. So if you're discussing on this level, it will be pretty difficult to explain to them how they can easily circumvent any ban on encryption technology. That doesn't work. I mean, it's a hard job that you have, but don't give up. That's all I can say about this. I will stop right here, but I think the next presentation is going on, but I will be here available. So if anybody wants to discuss this, we can discuss it. And I have left my email address as well. So there was some fruitful input coming from your side. So if you hear about any cases or anything going on where you're suspicious about, let me know, because it's just interesting for me as a lawyer to analyze that. Thank you very much for your kind attention.